Alright, let's talk about proofs involving Cpctc. And that's just a really fancy way of saying corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And that's a lot to remember and a lot to write, so they usually abbreviate it Cpctc, say it 50,000 times fast. Okay, so for example, how to fix your car. So remember that to use Cpctc, it's like saying the carburetor from a 57 Chevy is going to be the same as the carburetor from another 57 Chevy. Okay, jeans from Hollister are going to be the same jeans from Hollister in Ohio, or anything like that. An iPhone that you buy from the Apple Store is going to be like an iPhone that you buy from AT&T or something. Okay, so the parts are going to be the same. They're two congruent things. Okay, so if you have two carburetors from two unknown cars, who knows whether or not they're the same? Maybe a mechanic could tell you, but not me. Okay? So remember, before you use Cpctc, you must prove that the triangles in question are congruent first. Okay? So you need to do everything that you learned previously how to do. Prove two triangles are congruent. And then, once you have proved that two triangles are congruent, that means all the pieces of one triangle are equal to all the pieces of the corresponding parts in the other triangle. So, that's just a lot. Let me talk about it. Okay, so let's analyze a couple of these and then we're going to practice. So example 1, they gave me 3 givens. They marked them nice for me. So remember in proofs, you're going to put your givens at the top, left side, and then you're going to write given, given, given. And then once you have 3 pieces of information at least, then you can prove that the triangles are congruent. Okay, so you learned how to do steps 1 through 4 right here in the previous lesson. Okay, so notice this proof was different because it didn't say prove the two triangles are congruent right here. It says prove that angle C is congruent to angle F. Okay, so first off, you have to prove the triangle is congruent, and then what you've proved is every piece over here is congruent to every piece over here. So if these are congruent triangles, I know B and E are the same. I know C and F are the same. I know BC has to be congruent to EF. Okay? So if they're congruent, all of their pieces in corresponding places are the same. So the new part that you will learn is the proofs are going to look different. They're going to have a piece of an angle or a side, for example, and not a triangle. It will still go at the bottom. And the very last thing you'll end it with is Cpctc. And that stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So the corresponding parts here and here are congruent if the triangles are congruent. Whew! Okay. Number 2. Let's look and see what they did. They have 3 givens. Looks like side, side, side. Got my givens. Have my givens over here. I know this triangle is congruent to this one because it's side, side, side. And then I know every single piece is going to be congruent. So I know M is congruent to P. It could have said prove that N was congruent to Q. Could have said prove that O was congruent to R. Okay? So, Cpctc goes at the very bottom right, and you're going to be proving a piece of information from a side or an angle, and that's the only difference. Alright, let's practice. We've got 3 pictures. So first, notice the proof. It doesn't want me to prove the triangles are congruent. It wants me to prove that J is congruent to angle N. So first off, you need to start with your givens. So they didn't actually say anything was given, but they did give me some marks. So let's go off of this. So I know JL is congruent to NL. So let's go ahead and drop, or write in your case, that in the top given corner. My dog is chewing a pillow. Stop. Okay. And then the reason would be that is given. Okay. I have another piece of given information with this 2 double tick marks, so I know KL is congruent to ML. So let's write that on this statement, and then that reason would be it's given. So I can write given in my other category. Okay. The next thing is you need to mark a piece of information, and so I see vertical angles, so I know these angles are congruent. So you just have to name it. So you could have said K, L, or J. But I said L, K, J, and that's not right. So one way to name the vertical angles would be KLJ. and then MLN. Okay, so I have two vertical angles that are congruent, and the reason would be vertical angles are always congruent. Okay, so now I have three pieces of information, and I can prove the triangle is congruent by side angle side. So I just need to write the triangle, so you could just name the triangle any way you see fit. I named it LKJ, and then I said MNL, which that order is completely off, my bad. It should say angle KL or triangle KLJ is congruent to triangle MLN, my bad. And the reason will be side angle sine. Alright, so you've done all this before. I proved my triangles were congruent. Now the proof of what they wanted me to prove is going to go to the bottom left. And then the reasoning would be corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay? Now we could just put Cpctc if we're trying to like get a shortcut in, but I want you guys to understand that it means corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay? So that is how you would prove something using Cpctc. Okay? Now, I've got two more examples, but if you think you got it, please feel free to work ahead of me and try these on your own. But I'm going to go through. Actually, I want you to try this one on your own, and I will do the third one with y'all if you need it. But please press pause and try this one on your own because it's very, very, very similar. So here is the very similar problem to the one we just did. So they gave you two givens up here. They also marked them. So the givens go up in the top left and the reason be given. Your proof is always going to go on the bottom left. So I got the proof down there. If we're proving sides or angles are congruent, that would always be Cpctc. But you could make a mark for vertical angles here and here. So just make sure you named it correctly. I said ACB is congruent to ECD. You could have flipped the order and said BCA is congruent to DCE. But the reason would be vertical angles are congruent. Then you have side angle side. So you just had to name the name the congruent statement for the triangle in any order that you wanted to. That matched up to corresponding parts. And then lastly, if the two triangles are congruent, then you know every side and every angle are congruent by Cpctc. All right. Uno más. One more. All right. I have a triangle, I have two givens, and I have a proof. So my two givens are always going to go top left. So I'm going to go ahead and stick them down the top. And the reason would always be given and given. Okay? If you want, you can always put the proof in the bottom. If it tells you how many slots there are, you know it will go at the bottom. And I know it's going to be by Cpctc. Alright, but I've got something missing. So first, I can mark my sides are congruent here because they're touching and they're overlapping and they're the same length. And so TR is congruent to TR. It depends how you write it. If you say it how I just did, that would be the reflexive property. But you could have also said TR was congruent to RT, and that would be the symmetric property. Okay, so reflexive is the exact same on both sides. Alright, so now I have three pieces of information. So I have an angle and a side. And so that will be the reason the triangles are congruent. And then I just have to write the congruent statement in any order that you please. So I said triangle TRS was congruent to triangle RTQ. Okay? Again, you could have used any order. If they give you a vertical angle or something up here, you can always copy that and put triangles instead of angles, and it will always work. Okay? So that is how you would prove something using corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. It's not that more challenging. I mean, proofs are challenging in general, but it's just adding one more step to proofs. So feel free to practice and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.